At Devil's Kettle, half of a river really does disappear. Scientists tried to trace it. They measured the flow. They followed the current. And eventually, they were forced to stop. Not because the mystery was solved, but because going further no longer made sense. Devil's Kettle lies deep in the forests of northern Minnesota. Not a lifeless place, not a barren one. This is a place full of movement. Tall trees crowd the riverbanks. Dark volcanic rock presses in close to the water. As the Brule River enters this stretch, it narrows, as if being forced into a natural corridor. The current speeds up. The sound changes. At first, you don't see the hole. All you see is a normal river, until the surface of the water begins to split in two. On the right, the river pours over a familiar, beautiful waterfall. White water. Spray. Noise. Exactly what a waterfall is supposed to do. But on the left, the water is pulled toward a narrow point. It begins to spin, and then it drops straight out of sight. No plume rising from below. No mist drifting upward. Just a dark opening in the rock. Swallowing the flow. People standing on the overlook often do the same thing. They lean forward. They stare into the hole, waiting for something, anything, to appear beneath it. But nothing does. The water falls, and it does not return. That moment is what makes Devil's Kettle different from every other waterfall. Not because it's violent, not because it's dangerous, but because half a river simply stops being there. What makes it even more unsettling is what happens downstream. The Brule River continues on, flowing as if nothing is wrong. No sudden drop in volume. No obvious loss. No sign that half its water vanished just upstream. If you stand there long enough, one thing becomes clear. Devil's Kettle doesn't behave like it's hiding something. It behaves as if this is completely normal. And that quiet contradiction is what finally pushed people to start asking questions. Once people realized this wasn't just a strange-looking waterfall, they did what humans always do. They tried to measure it. At first, the attempts were simple, almost casual. Visitors dropped sticks into the hole, branches, logs. They watched them spin once, maybe twice, and then disappear. Nothing floated back up. Nothing washed out downstream. So people tried again, with better tools, brightly colored tennis balls, floating markers, anything that should be impossible to miss. If it ever came back, they stood below the falls. They waited along the riverbanks. They searched downstream. Nothing appeared. That's when curiosity turned into testing. Scientists poured dye into the water, the kind used to trace underground rivers. The logic was straightforward. If the water was flowing through a hidden channel, the dye would eventually show up somewhere else. But it didn't. No color in nearby streams, no tint in Lake Superior, no trace at all. Then came the trackers. Small devices designed to survive turbulence, built to send signals, even when buried or submerged. They were dropped into the hole, one after another. None of them transmitted again. At this point, the mystery wasn't growing louder. It was growing quieter. Because while everything thrown into Devil's Kettle vanished, the river itself refused to cooperate with the mystery. Downstream measurements told a different story. The Brule River flowed on, with a volume that made sense. No sudden loss, no dramatic change, no missing half. As far as the numbers were concerned, nothing unusual was happening at all. And that's where the problem really began. Because now there were two truths that could not exist together. The objects were gone, but the water wasn't. Every test confirmed it. Again and again, people weren't failing to collect data. They were collecting data that refused to agree with itself. And quietly, without anyone saying it out loud, a new question started to form. Not where does the water go, but something far more unsettling. What if we're trying to understand this in the wrong way entirely? At this point, the mystery was no longer about missing objects. It was about broken expectations. Because everything people believed about river said this shouldn't be possible. Water doesn't disappear. It moves. It flows. It connects. If something falls into a river, it should come out somewhere else. That assumption had always worked. Until Devil's Kettle. Here, every tool behaved as expected, except the system itself. The die didn't reappear. The trackers went silent. The objects vanished. Yet the river refused to show any sign of loss. So scientists began to question, not the measurements, but the ideas behind them. What if the water wasn't traveling through a single, traceable channel? What if it wasn't moving in the way rivers usually do it all? The geology made things even harder. The rock beneath Devil's Kettle was ancient rhyolite, dense, fractured, unpredictable. Not the kind of stone that neatly guides water from point A to point B. More like a shattered maze. In some places, water could slip through narrow cracks. In others, it could spread, split, and slow in ways no surface model could capture. But none of that explained why objects disappeared, while water clearly continued downstream. The more closely scientists looked, the less the problem resembled a plumbing puzzle. This wasn't a question of where is the exit, it was a question of whether the system even had one. And that's when the tone of the investigation changed, because chasing an answer now meant something different. It meant drilling, digging, forcing access into a structure that had formed over thousands of years. And no one could say with certainty what would happen if they did. The mystery hadn't become more dramatic. It had become more uncomfortable. Because the tools were no longer failing, the assumptions were. Eventually, the question stopped being scientific. It became practical. To push further, researchers would have to drill into the rock beneath Devil's Kettle. They would have to break open a system that had formed naturally over thousands of years, without fully understanding how it worked. And once that rock was disturbed, there would be no way to put it back the way it was. No second attempt. No reset. If they were wrong, the damage would be permanent. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just irreversible. So the conversation changed. Not can we find the answer, but should we force one? In the end, no disaster made the decision for them. No collapse. No sudden revelation. Just the quiet realization that some questions carry a cost higher than the value of the answer. And so, the drilling never happened. The hole was left alone. Devil's Kettle continued to do exactly what it had always done. Water kept falling. Objects kept disappearing. Downstream, the river flowed on as if nothing were wrong. Today, Devil's Kettle remains unsolved. Not because humans couldn't keep pushing, but because, for once, they chose not to. And that may be the most unsettling part of the story, because it means the mystery isn't hidden. It's right there, in plain sight, still happening, still unanswered.